to another concert at the oldest playbook. Look, we're moving on to some characters, and this is all about the Bible and decoding it from the perspective and for founders and builders. My name's David. I have been a founder for a very long time. Today, I'm the VC who hates most VCs, but that's more of a joking moniker because I don't hate many people. I'm here because I feel that it's my job and calling to help as many founders as possible. And what authority do I have? I don't have much authority except that I really do enjoy scripture, the oldest playbook, the Bible. I am a student at the Fuller Theological Seminary, so I do have some theological chops. I am also a trained lawyer, right? So I am a bit of a geek when it comes to digging into old books, old texts, and deconstructing it and decoding it for what business? Because I've been doing business for over 20 years since I was a wee little kid. And now that I'm in my mid 40s, I find that there's so much wisdom unpack and to share that I'm even learning day to day. That's what I'm here to share with you guys. Hey, let's move in right away. I don't want to waste too much time because there's something juicy going on today. We're going to dive into a new character. Um, it's Esther. It's the first female character we're actually dealing with at the oldest playbook. Esther 1 through 4. Go ahead and look at the scripture. If you have your Bibles, please go to Esther, the book of Esther. Uh, we're only going to be covering 4 chapters. It's a total of 10 chapters in the book of Esther. If you don't have a Bible, you can go ahead and look it up on your phone. Esther chapter 1, Old Testament, right after Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah. So I'll wait for you. Go ahead and find it. Okay, I hope you have it in front of you. 10 chapters in this book, okay? Today, we're only going to go over 4, and we stop in the middle of the biggest decision in it. So, part 2, we finish next week, okay? Uh, 3 places I'll put real weight if you want to mark them down now. We're going to put some real weight in chapter 2, verses 7 through 15. You can mark that down. It's how she gets in, okay? She gets in. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. This is where everything goes wrong. And then chapter 4, verses 11 through 16, the decision. But I mean, this is a lot, I suppose, for some of us. So if you only mark one verse tonight, right, one verse, that would be chapter 4, verse 14. All right, before we open into it, I have one question for you, okay? How much of it did you actually choose? How much of it, and it is the business you're involved in, the startup that you are wrestling in, how much of it was actually your choice? Think about the position you're in right now. Your company, your title, your market, the city you're building in. How much of it did you actually choose? Think about it. Most of us carry 2 founding stories, I think. Okay. And I talk to a lot of founders, guys, about 30 per week, sometimes less, sometimes more. There's the story on the website, the decision, the insight, the leap on the pitch deck. There's a public story that all these founders and builders have. And then there's a real one, the one where you got laid off, your co-founder left you, your passport picked the country that you're building in, right? Your father's business or your family's business was the only industry you'd ever seen from the inside. So these are the real stories behind the makeup. The deck version is a choice. The real version is usually a set of conditions that happened to you. You really didn't have a choice. So let me say what Esther is not, the book of Esther, and who this character is not. Okay, it is not a story about a princess. People think it is, and yes, I get it. Esther is a princess and whatever, queen, but that's not what the story. It is a case study in what a person does with a position they did not choose, inside a system they did not control, and on a deadline they didn't set. Okay, and here's the detail that should make every operator in this room lean in. Okay, this is a detail that Many of you, especially those of you who are skeptical about scripture, should listen in. In the book of Esther, guys, God is never mentioned in this book, not once. I repeat, God isn't mentioned in the book of Esther. No divine name appears anywhere in the Hebrew text of Esther. The only book in the Hebrew Bible you can say that about, which honestly makes it even more of a honest book in some ways, right? About life, actually, how it feels. Nobody's narrating. There's no voice from the sky that's telling you that you're on the right track. There's just a sequence of decisions and actions that only make sense in hindsight. So let's get right into it, okay? The first beat that I want to touch on is there's three ways into a room. There's three ways of how you ended up where you are today, right? And this is just me decoding the stories that we've encountered in the past, we're encountering today, and we will encounter tomorrow, okay? So start with how she got here. Let's look at that. The Bible gives us three Jews and three foreign courts, right? There's these stories across the Old Testament arriving in three completely different ways. Okay. There was Joseph, there's Daniel, and there's Esther. Okay. We're going to cover all three. We already talked about Joseph last week. We're talking about Esther today. We're going to talk about Esther next week too, but we're going to talk about Daniel eventually. So all three characters, Joseph, Esther, and Daniel, were carried into a foreign land or about them in a foreign land. So for those of you who are third culture, who are immigrants, or who are, expats building in another country, this should hit home to you, okay? Joseph was sold in to where he is. His brothers put him in a pit, took cash. Daniel was carried in. An army shows up, takes the smartest kids, and marches them to Babylon. That's what happened to Daniel. Both have a villain in the book of Joseph and not the book of Joseph, the book of Genesis about Joseph and the book of Daniel. Both have dates, both have a scene you can point at. Esther, however, was born into it. She wasn't carried in or sold in. Nobody deported Esther. There's no origin trauma with a timestamp on it. She woke up in Susa in a royal citadel of an empire that ran from India to Ethiopia. It's a huge empire. And that was simply the water she was always swimming in. Founders arrived the same three ways, if you think about it. Let's just chop it up and analyze this. Some of you were sold in, pushed out, fired by your last company. Some of you were carried in. You're recruited, a door opened, a fund found you. But there's a third type of some of you are born into it. You never chose the category or you inherited it. You just kind of had to slip into it. And in some ways, this third category of being born into it is the hardest to make peace with. And I see this all the time with founders. Founders who were sold in, right? You were kind of like fired or pushed into it. You have someone to blame, right? You have this Goliath that you can blame, you can conquer, having this bigger enemy. And when you're carried in, you have a story to tell, right? Some of these doors opened and this opportunity came. So you've seized the opportunity. But when you're born into it, it's kind of like you didn't have a decision, but you're just there. You have nothing to point to. You have no agency. So you spend years quietly relitigating internally your starting conditions. Why this industry? Why this country? Why not something else? Why am I here? Why? And it's a tough question, especially in this day and age where independence, choice, self-agency means so much, right? The unchangeable things already happened for those of us who were born into it. So Esther's book begins on the far side of that sentence. She never gets a scene where she processes being an orphan in a foreign country. The text is completely uninterested in why she's there. We don't get that background. It is only interested in that she does now what she is doing here and at that moment. That's the first move. Stop auditing the entry. Start working the position. That so she's just writing it. And her resume was terrible, guys. Kind of moving on to beat two. So let's be accurate. Because we tend to sand this book into something inspirational. Right? Whenever we name our daughters or sisters or Esther, and we talk about Esther as this beautified, glorified thing, but Esther was an orphan. Chapter 2, verse 7, she had neither father nor mother. Mordecai is her cousin. He raised her as a daughter. He must have been a much older cousin, right? She is an ethnic minority and she is hiding it. Mordecai instructed her not to disclose that she was Jewish, and so she didn't. She lived in hiding. So she's an ethnic minority, she's in hiding, and she is a woman in a court where the previous queen was removed by royal decree for declining an invitation. Removed is a sweet way to put it. She was just murdered, right? And here's the part that gets petrified the most. Prettified, not petrified, prettified. It's made beautified. She did not enter a contest. Look at the grammar in chapter 2, verse 8. It says, the young women with an E, were gathered. Esther was taken, both passive, taken. They were gathered and was taken. They're both passive words. Royal officers were appointed to collect these young women. She wasn't recruited, she was collected. That's a version of this. There's a version of this that where I tell you hardship is secretly a gift, and I don't believe that. Her conditions were bad, genuinely bad. Um, another way to put this is every immigrant family in this room will recognize this, okay? People look at the second generation children and say, wow, these kids are sharp. Second generation means your parents immigrated to, let's say, the United States. So that's the first generation. Second generation is what? The generation that was born in America. So I'm technically second generation. My parents immigrated to the United States in the 70s, and I was born, and that's there you have it. Um, so second generation kids, there's a reputation, especially if you're immigrants and you're familiar with first, second, or third generations. There's a reputation. A lot of people think second generation sharp. These kids are impressive. They're doing so well, but nobody sees what the parents paid to make that come true. So the honest claim is not that the conditions are these bad conditions are good. We don't want to say that. We don't want to say, oh, the hardship was good. It's that bad conditions are not disqualifying. They're the material, okay? Um, I don't think it's right or it's welcome to say, oh, hard conditions are always good. You know, if it doesn't kill you, it's gonna make you. There's truth to it, but I think we want to, when we approach this text, let's not look at it from hindsight. Let's look at it as though we are living it contemporaneously. And when we do, there's no way to say that this condition's good. Okay, so let's move on. Esther, favor is not beauty. And you realize that. She's gathered, the royal court takes them. Now, the most useful idea in this book for anybody who raises money or sells enterprises, hires senior people, the text says that Esther was beautiful. Fine. But read the chapter carefully, okay? Let's read chapter 2 carefully. What it says is there were a lot of beautiful women in that building. Beauty was the entry requirement, not the differentiator. We know Esther was beautiful, but that wasn't the defining standout trait. All of these women that were gathered and taken to the court were beautiful. So what actually happened? What happened? What actually happened? What made Esther special? So the young woman pleased him and won his favor, is what chapter 2, verse 9 says. Him is Haggai. Him is Haggai. This is the king's eunuch, okay? The man who ran the women's quarters. Not the king, not the gatekeeper, a eunuch. Haggai favored Esther. That's the hinge of the whole chapter here, chapter 2. And watch what she does with it. Chapter 2, 15. When her turn came, she asked for nothing except that Haggai advised. So she asked for nothing except what Haggai advised. So she had a blank check. Any jewelry, anything from the treasury, total control over her own pitch. She could. This is how it worked at the court at the time. Is these girls were gathered and brought into the palace before they're presented to the king. They are given a blank check, basically. Anything they want to wear, any perfume they want to spray, any makeup, any jewelry they want to wear, they have it, and they are allowed to decorate themselves however they want to put their best selves forward before the king. It's like pitch deck, right? You, when you pitch to investors or when investors pitch to LPs, we're always pitching to somebody. So for those of you who believe in this kind of thing, if you are pitching to, your future spouse's parents, okay, we all have this chance to put our best foot forward, right? Total control over her pitch, Esther had, but she used none of it. She asked the one person who actually knew the room what to walk in with, and she did that. She didn't over obsess about anything else. How many founders in here could have done that? I wonder. How many of you could have actually done that? Let's say someone who knew the room and you know they know the room gives you advice contrary to what you think. They tell you, don't talk about AI. They tell you, in fact, don't even have a pitch deck. They tell you when you go in there, just listen and ask the following three questions, right? They coach you in some odd way that's contrary to what you think is putting your best foot forward. Could you have done it? Could you have listened to this person? Here's a translation. Early on, you get judged on your numbers, right? Growth rate, margin, retention. That's real. Traction. And you should be great at it. But past a certain level, everybody's number looks hazy and the same. After you hear about 30 pitches a week, you begin to kind of blur everybody. And everyone in their final round is good. Nobody gets the last meeting with bad metrics. So, when founders pitch, there's almost like a funnel, right? There's like the first round of people we all look at, and it kind of filters down towards the investing committee. And when it gets there, almost every business that gets to that point is really good, and every founder is impressive. And at that point, the only question left in the room is, do I want to be in a foxhole with this person for 10 years? Can I trust them? And that's favor. And you cannot manufacture that, right? That's the uncomfortable part. Favor is not a growth channel. There is no playbook where step four is obtained. Like just like there's a playbook that'll just tell you how to obtain favor, right? But here's the proof that it's real. And this is the detail I love. The favor did not expire. Jump ahead to chapter 5, verse 2. Okay. Years later, the pageant long over, she walks into the inner court uninvited, Esther does, which by law is a death sentence, and the king extends the golden scepter. If this had been about her face, it would have ran out. Okay, it didn't. So this was years later. It wasn't just about her beauty. And I need us to understand this. Esther, we think it's because of her beauty that somehow the king favored her and people were just gaga. But beauty wasn't a precious or exclusive trait. We notice again there are many, many beautiful women in this book right now. So you can't manufacture favor. There's favor. And you can be the kind of person it lands on, and you can do what Esther did. Take counsel from the person who knows the room better than you do, instead of over optimizing your own pitch, right? There's favor. And once you have it, you want to really lean into it, right? And it's one of those things where you just know. And it's not about how you look. Um, it's about these relationships and how teachable you are sometimes, right? Think about for those of you who are parents, you know, how does a child gain your favor if you have multiple children? Look, you love all your kids. If you have more than one child, you know you love all of them. But there are seasons and moments where a child, a particular child has your favor. But what, why? Reflect on that for a second. It has a lot to do with relationships. It has to do with obedience. It has to do with just this dense meshing. Think about it, okay? So we're going to talk about Mordecai now. Esther is the name of the book, but Mordecai is the one I can't stop thinking about. Mordecai, if you remember, was Esther's cousin who raised her. He was much older than her. And I'd argue he's more relevant character than most of you think he is, because most of you right now are somebody's Mordecai, okay? Um, he does three things separated by years. One, he raises Esther, an orphan cousin, no upside, no exit. In a foreign empire, she is a liability. But he is faithful and he raises her. Two, he protects her from a position of zero power. Chapter 2, verse 11. Turn to it, guys. Chapter 2, verse 11 says, And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Every day. He can't get in. He has no authority in that building. All he has is presence outside the wall, and he's just making sure she's okay. If you're ever promoted if you've ever promoted someone into a bigger role or job than they were, then had to sit outside while they were in a meeting and whatnot, this verse is about you, right? 3, he names her calling out loud at the moment it counts, right? So chapter 4, verse 14, this is the verse I want everyone to actually think about. Um, For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Um, that was the New King James Version, but the ESV, for if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish, even if release comes from another place, you'll perish. And who knows whether you have come or you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Look, if you unpack this, red cold, this is pretty brutal. So Mordecai is telling the daughter, right, his foster daughter, his adopted daughter that he raised, go do the thing that will probably kill you. And if you don't, you'll die anyway. And it won't even matter because someone else will do it, if not you. So who talks to your daughter like that, right? Here's the answer, and it's the whole lesson. You can only say a sentence like that to someone whose trust you funded for 20 years. You can't talk that way just to anybody. So go back to chapter 2. He told her to conceal her identity, and she just did it. No debate, no negotiation. She just obeyed. Verse 20 says she kept following his instructions the way she had when he was raising her. That's the balance in the account. The withdrawal in chapter 4 is only possible because of the deposits in chapter 2. The withdrawal, right? Deposits, withdrawal. Um, one of the scholars I was talking to about this gave me this image. Here's that reframed the entire book for me. Um, she said that this is Moses' mother putting the baby in a basket, pushing it into the river and watching it from a distance. You send the one you love most into the room you cannot enter. That is what sponsorship actually costs. Not a warm intro, watching from the outside the wall. So here's the operator question. How hard a conversation can you have with your key people right now? That's not a communication style problem. It's an accounting problem. How much deposit, how much credit have you know, put in, right? A direct readout of what you're deposited before is just a reflection of the kind of conversation you have with your key people. Um, if you can't have the difficult, raw conversations, you have to wonder, have you built enough trust and favor and love and credit? Um, okay, this is the final beat I want to cover. Okay. I really like this book, by the way. Look at the actual decision in chapter 4 because we sanitized this one too. Option A, walk into the inner court uninvited. Chapter 4, verse 11. One law put to death unless the king extends a scepter. All right. And then a detail that's easy to skim past. Okay. I have not been called to come into the king to see the king these 30 days. So she is out of favor, it seems. 30 days of silence from the most powerful man on earth, and she is about to bet her life on his mood. So the king at this point is very, it's like a, it's a boy. It's a boy who can throw a tantrum and his temper is unpredictable, right? So that's option A is just you walk into the court uninvited. Option B is stay quiet, but that could also mean death. It just means death maybe later for everybody else too. So she had two options: walk into the court uninvited, and she knows that the king didn't even call her for 30 days, hoping that he'll extend the golden scepter, or just wait and just die a slow death. This is not a choice between a good option and a bad one. It's just bad versus worse, right? Most of the decisions that actually define your company are shaped like this. It's not good or bad. It's bad or worse. It's like a nightmare and the worst nightmare, right? Layoffs versus running out of runway. Firing the executive who's failing versus 6 more months of damage while you're being nice about it. Sometimes you just have to fire people. Um, and the question you're asking, what's the right call, right? Is it usually the wrong question to ask that? No, it's not. And there's no right call. The real question is, which risk am I willing to own? That's the real question. Now, the part nobody talks about is if you go back to chapter 3, verse 1 through 6, why did Mordecai refuse to bow to Haman? The text doesn't say. Chapter 3 just states it. So Haman is the powerful court official, right? And he's corrupt. And the text doesn't say why Mordecai didn't bow down to him, but functionally what Haman wanted was closer to a greeting than an act of worship, right? An ego tax. Mordecai wouldn't pay it. And the bill came to his entire people, right? Every Jew in 127 provinces got a death sentence because the one man would not nod or bow or just, humor this man at the gate. So this is uncomfortable, and I think it should stay uncomfortable. Because if you lead anything, this happens to you. You will hold a line on a term, on a customer you won't take, or on a person you won't work with. And you will be right, and other people will pay for it: your team, your family, your investors. A leader's conviction is something that shouldn't be compromised. A leader's conviction always has a build-up. Someday, somebody else usually gets it handed off to them. If that thought has never woken you up at 3 a.m. in the morning, you probably haven't held a real line. Like, right? This is a line I draw, and I'm not going to go past it. If you're the kind of leader that just keeps compromising in your values and principles, and you're flexible like a bamboo, you've never had this experience. And that too, you should question yourself. So, and you know what? One more thing. The piece of Esther I've never seen until this conversation. It isn't the chapter about this chapter 1 through 4. It's what's underneath it all. Okay. Ask why these Jews are in Persia in the first place. So if you haven't caught on, this is Persia, and these Jews are there, right? A little bit of history. Cyrus issues the decree letting the Jews go back home in 538 BC. So that's Ezra chapter 1. So the first group went back that year. The temple was finished in 516 BC, so Esther happens under Xerxes, roughly between 483 to 473 BC. So if you do the math, the door had been open for more than 50 years. So these people, the Hebrews, are descendants of ones who did not walk through that door and went back home. So they had an opportunity, these people, to go back to their motherland or their land of origin of their ancestors. But Esther, Mordecai, these people are the ones that stayed behind. And the text never says why they did. So I'm reading between the lines here, okay? Some stayed because perhaps business was good, or maybe they had no choice. They had no family back, or they had no reason to go back. Some had married into different families, some had children who only spoke Persian, right? And grandparents were buried in Persian ground. So by this point, this was home. Going back to their motherland could feel like going back to a foreign country that's even more mysterious and more scary. Somebody had to look at a wife, two kids, and build it and decide whether going back to God's city it meant abandoning their family or whatnot. There are these difficult decisions family had to make. By the strict reading, that's the compromise crowd, though. The heroes went back. The ones that stayed behind, um, they took the comfortable option. Is kind of the reading in between the lines. So some ways Mordecai and Esther, these people who stayed behind, the way I see it is that they're not necessarily the favored group, even within the Hebrew or the Jewish tradition, right? Um, God's view of those people and their own view of themselves were probably different, right? not to the ones who made the pure choice, the ones who stayed. And I want to be careful here because this isn't permission to compromise, by the way. But if you are sitting there running the tape on a decision you're not proud of, you took the money, you stayed at the job, or you didn't move, you optimized for your family instead of the calling. This book has something to say. And this has been sitting with me, and I want to share that with you. The rescue in your story may show up on the far side of a decision you would never put in the deck, right? You don't know when that's coming. It's really encouraging actually for me as a second generation Korean American to read this, right? A lot of whether you're Korean American or German American or Brazilian American, Chinese American, Japanese American, when you're in America and then you get educated in America and you've been living in America for a long time, and then there comes a choice at some point, right, to go back to your ancestral home. But that ancestral home feels more foreign to you than America. America is now your home. This is your home. You're American. So what's the right thing to do? And then there's, by the way, this is not the same thing I know what Esther's going through in that, but it does make you reflect it. So let me land on this, okay? Esther is terrified. 3 days of fasting, and then the flattest, most honest line in scripture is, "If I perish, I perish." That's what she says. Notice what does not happen though. The odds do not improve. Nobody guarantees her anything. The law doesn't change. The scepter is still the flip of a coin, depending on the king's temper. What changes is that the assignment gets clear. And that's the mechanism. Fear does not leave when the risk drops. Fear leaves when the calling gets clear. And the inverse is what kills companies. When the vision is fuzzy, you compromise. Vision is so important in this matter, right? Then the line I'd like to send you home with is this. It's in the middle of chapter 4 of 14, right? If you stay silent, deliverance will come from another place. You're not indispensable, is what Esther is being told, and that's true for all of us, right? That should be the relief, the work that does not depend on you. You're not necessary, you're invited. And this should also humble us. A lot of founders and entrepreneurs, we have this view that if not me, we have this hero image of ourselves, and it's important to have it. But I also realized something, the humility of understanding that, if I don't do this, somebody else will. That should put a fire under your belt, right? Um, so look, next time we'll cover more of this, but as an Asian American who's reading Esther, as a founder who's reading Esther, um, I'm inspired. I'm inspired that, you know what, I don't need to have control over everything. And whenever I am faced with a difficult decision and an even more difficult choice, what we should be doing isn't talking to more people or talking to ChatGPT and Claude to get clarity. What we should be doing is sitting and trying to get clarity through vision. Because when we sit with that and we understand why we are here in the first place, we understand the fundamental, the first principles of what brought us here, then the decision making gets easier. And that's what Esther is doing here, right? All right, part two is about the next week. We're going to talk about what happens after the brave decision Esther makes as she enters the king's court, right? So timing, sequencing, and discovery. That the most courageous people in this book turns out to be the most patient strategists in it. Okay, we're going to talk about that. So I'll see you guys next week. I know this was a little bit of a, like I try to be ambitious, try to cover 4 chapters. It's ambitious, but I hope that was helpful, guys. For those who have more questions or thoughts, I'm going to put a Zoom link into the LinkedIn comment section. Join me if you will. If not, that's fine. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you very much, guys. I hope that you have a blessed weekend and a blessed week to come. Hopefully, Esther can give you some clarity in the way you build and the way you operate your business. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.